Deep beneath the grandeur of Topkapi Palace, in chambers most tourists never see, lies a darker truth about the Ottoman Empire that history books barely whisper about. Between the fall of Constantinople in 1453 and the empire's collapse in the 20th century, Christian nuns and monks faced a systematic erasure so brutal that entire monastic communities simply vanished from the map. This isn't just another conquest story. This is about what happened when faith became a weapon and devotion became a death sentence. Before we continue, subscribe to my channel for more mind-blowing facts on the wonders of the ancient world. When Sultan Mehmed II rode through the gates of Constantinople in 1453, the world's largest church, the Hagia Sophia, stood as Christianity's crown jewel. Within hours, crosses were ripped down, bells silenced, and a formal decree converted it into a mosque. This wasn't just symbolic. It was a template for what would come next across territories spanning 3 continents. The Ottoman Empire didn't just conquer land. It systematically dismantled the Byzantine Orthodox Church piece by piece, community by community, soul by soul. Now, you might think monasteries were safe havens, protected by their spiritual purpose. Think again. Ottoman law classified Christians and Jews as dhimmis, which sounds nicer than it was. Sure, they were protected, but that protection came with crushing conditions. Every Christian had to pay a special tax called the jizya. Fail to pay, and you faced imprisonment, enslavement, or execution. Monasteries weren't exempt. Not from taxes, not from confiscation, and definitely not from the terror that came knocking at their doors in the form of the devşirme. The devşirme, or child levy, represents one of history's most calculated nightmares. Ottoman officials would sweep through Christian villages, identifying the strongest, smartest boys. These children were then ripped from their families, forcibly converted to Islam, and trained as janissaries, or for administrative roles in the Sultan's service. While the levy targeted boys, the psychological warfare it inflicted on nuns and monks who had dedicated their lives to these communities was savage. Imagine spending years in prayer and service, only to watch the children you taught disappear into a system designed to erase everything you stood for. The grief wasn't just emotional, it was existential, but the assault on monastic life went deeper than taxes and child conscription. Ottoman authorities legally forbade the repair of existing churches or the construction of new ones. Church bells, which had called the faithful to prayer for centuries, were banned across vast stretches of the empire. The silence was deafening. Nuns and monks faced legal restrictions that strangled recruitment. Monastic properties were seized and redesignated as vakıf, pious endowments that funded Muslim institutions instead. Over time, the Ottoman state simply dissolved Orthodox monastic communities through legal maneuvering. No dramatic battles, no headlines, just slow bureaucratic suffocation. Yet the physical dangers were far more immediate and brutal than any law. When Ottoman forces conquered cities, enslavement of the population was standard practice. The sack of Thessalonica in 1430 saw thousands enslaved in a single day. Women and girls were especially prized in Ottoman slave markets. The penchik system gave the state 1/5 of all war captives, and female members of defeated ruling classes were paraded as conquest trophies. Where did many of these women end up? The imperial harem at Topkapi Palace, staffed by hundreds of enslaved women, many of them Christian. Domestic service for these captives often meant sexual servitude. Nuns, despite their vows and devotion, were not immune to this fate. The journey to captivity was its own horror. Ottoman naval galleys were powered by rowers, often slaves and prisoners of war chained to their benches. The voyage from Greek ports through the Bosphorus Strait to Constantinople was perilous. For women religious who had lived cloistered lives dedicated to prayer, the shock of being chained on ships surrounded by violence and despair, must have been incomprehensible. The Bosphorus became a symbolic gateway into a world that viewed them not as brides of Christ, but as assets to be catalogued. Ottoman record keepers maintained meticulous population ledgers called defters, where people appeared as numbers and taxable resources, stripped of identity and humanity. Some nuns and monks tried to survive by becoming crypto-Christians, outwardly practicing Islam while secretly maintaining their faith. But this came with its own terror. Under Ottoman law, apostasy from Islam was theoretically punishable by death. Once converted, even by force, leaving Islam meant risking execution. The pressure to remain Muslim, even for those who never believed, created generation after generation of people living double lives, hiding their true faith in the shadows. Secret Christian communities existed throughout the Ottoman period, practicing their rituals in basements and forests, always one betrayal away from destruction. The patriarchal records of the Orthodox Church document centuries of desperate attempts to keep monasteries functioning under impossible conditions. The Great Church of Christ in Constantinople, the spiritual heart of Orthodoxy, was repeatedly forced into smaller and smaller buildings. The Fener district became the Patriarch's seat, but under suffocating Ottoman oversight. Authorities deposed and appointed patriarchs for political convenience, turning spiritual leadership into a puppet show. When the Greek War of Independence erupted in the 1820s, Patriarch Gregory V was hanged on Easter Sunday as collective punishment. Tens of thousands of Greeks were massacred in the lead-up to that war. The Armenian Apostolic Church endured even worse. The Hamidian massacres of the 1890s killed tens of thousands of Armenian Christians. Villages were burned, churches destroyed, monasteries pillaged. The Adana massacre of 1909 added thousands more deaths. Then came 1915. The Tehcir law provided a legal facade for what followed: systematic deportation and extermination. Death marches through the Syrian desert became the primary method of killing. Monks and nuns were explicitly targeted for execution during what became the Armenian Genocide. American and German diplomats filed report after report documenting the horror. Assyrian and Greek populations faced similar campaigns of destruction. The Sappho, or sword, refers to the genocide of Assyrians. The Great Fire of Smyrna in 1922 incinerated the Christian quarters of that city, ending a 3,000-year Greek presence in Anatolia. This erasure continues in subtler forms today. The Halki Seminary, the primary school of Orthodox theology in Turkey, was closed in 1971 and remains shuttered. The Ecumenical Patriarchate in Istanbul exists in constant legal uncertainty. The Hagia Sophia was converted from a museum back into a mosque in 2020. The Chora Church followed. Mor Gabriel Monastery, one of the world's oldest Christian sites, faces endless legal battles over its land. Discussing the Armenian Genocide remains a criminal offence in Turkey under Article 301. In 1900, Christians made up over 20% of Turkey's population. Today, that number is less than 0.2%. What happened to Christian nuns under Ottoman rule wasn't just conquest. It was systematic erasure spanning centuries, combining legal suffocation, economic strangulation, physical violence, and sexual exploitation. The monasteries that survived did so by sheer stubborn faith in the face of overwhelming darkness. Most didn't make it. If this history shocked you, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories the textbooks won't tell you. Share this with anyone who thinks religious persecution is just ancient history. Because understanding how erasure happens, one community at a time, one law at a time, one silenced bell at a time, that's how we make sure it never happens again.